Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to an AI special for Anfield Index. Arne Slot is moving into the last 18 months of his contract. There's a lot of talk about whether he'll get a new one. It seems the suggestions are talks have stopped. There's a lot still to play for before the end of the season, and Arne Slot might well be playing for his future. We're here to talk about it all. We're here to talk about recruitment, man management, style of play, even the possibility of the future, maybe an interim, who knows. I'm joined as ever by the renowned and the respected Lewis Steele, and it's a busy little period for you because actually I've caught you just before you're about to head off for the Barnsley game, haven't I?
Yeah, it's always busy this time of year because the matches come thick and fast. But I have to be honest, I was thinking just before we came on air, I was thinking, feels a while since Liverpool have played, and I realised I actually just completely forgot that the Arsenal game happened. I thought Liverpool obviously played very, very well then, but it wasn't one that you'll be remembering in a couple of years' time. Let's put it that way. But yeah, busy. Maybe not so busy in the Liverpool transfer department, but I'm sure we may discuss that at some point.
Yeah, recruitment has got to be on the agenda, hasn't it? And I suppose as we start with the talk about Arne Slot and his future, Lewis, rather than sort of just go, first of all, step by step, what is your gut telling you right now about Arne Slot and his future? Whether you think he'll be renewed, whether you think he's doing a good job from where he should be right now, what are you thinking individually?
Well, from everyone that I speak to at Liverpool, I would say he's quite safe, to be honest. Obviously, he's not as safe as he was in May when he won the title, or April, whenever it was. But I think the top dogs in the club are sort of relatively pleased with what he's done in his first 18 months. But obviously, everyone can see that the last 3 or 4 months have been pretty poor.
Yeah.
And I've written a lot about that. You've debated on here a lot about that. Just that the first season was so good that this one is just such a bad hangover from that. And there have been signs that it's getting better. And I do think that the new signings will slowly come good. But it does feel like what is it, 10 games unbeaten now? But they've not been good in that time. Let's put it that way. But you have to give him a little bit of credit for steadying the ship a little bit. But overall, it does sound like he's safe. The noise has died down about his, potential. There was a lot of talk about whether he should go or whatever. I know a lot of fans are still upset with him, and I think they have a right to be. But right now, it does feel like he's got the backing of upstairs,
which is who will ultimately make the decision at the same time. We'll go through it step by step, ladies and gents. We'll examine everything over sort of the last 6 months, even back a little bit further. And we'll push Lewis on all sides and put certain arguments to him. I suppose the starting point, because it is important that we balance this more than anything. You talked about, obviously, what had happened, the title-winning manager. But I think if you go back to last summer and obviously the tragedy around Diogo Jota, it does have to be said that is one thing that you'll just never be able to quantify what that's done to Arne Slot, the Liverpool teammates. There's just no way of measuring that at all.
No, and it's something that we'll never be able to put a numerical value on because, the average age of the squad is mid-20s, and a lot of these people probably have never dealt with grief of that sort before. In terms of, I'm sure they've all probably lost a grandparent, or maybe some have lost other people in their families. But to lose someone their own age, I think that makes it even more sad for them, really. And they probably don't know how to feel, and it's probably horrible. You can imagine going into the dressing room every day, seeing his shirt, thinking that's where he would have been sat.
Yeah.
And I think that it's had a massive impact on him. You can say that whether they would admit that or not. I think you'll never be able to put a value on just how much it's impacted them, but it definitely has, in terms of just their mental day-to-day well-being. So that's obviously something that I think that we should take into account with every debate about Liverpool. season and even into next season and beyond. But definitely this season, it's something that you need to counteract every bad argument with just saying we don't know how much that's influenced them, and it's definitely quite significant.
It is. There's no way of escaping that at all. And I suppose you all have seen the arguments because I think you phrased it right. People are upset with Arne Slot. You will see fans who express those sentiments, and there's understandable nature of that and what's being said, the football. But I think it is important to say this is a title-winning manager. There's an element of class to the way he speaks and he conducts himself. So everything should be respectful to Arne Slot as well, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that from what I see online and Twitter and whatever, I feel like there's a lot of people hating Slot at the moment, and I sort of think that you need to sort of be. You can disagree with his tactics and disagree with him as a manager, but you can still at the same time respect what he's done for the club. And I think that's sort of where I sit in that. I see him as someone who's brought the league title to Liverpool, only the second manager in the last 30 years to do that. You look at how long it's taken Arteta, for example. He's going to win it this year, most probably, but it's taken him 5, 6, I don't know how many years to do that. Slot's rocked up in a new country and done that in his first season, so I think he deserves an awful amount of credit. But also, that doesn't make him exempt from criticism. Whereas I think a lot of the arguments on Twitter are you either love him or you hate him, but you can sort of sit somewhere in the middle, and that's probably the measured view, which seems to get lost sometimes when people are so vitriolic towards him, or people are so, oh, he's a saint, he can't do anything wrong. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle,
as it tends to be with a lot of these arguments. And we'll go through some of the big topics now. And for any football club, whenever they start the season, Lewis, the biggest topic is always going to be recruitment. A lot of things will be defined by that. And Liverpool spent a fortune, didn't they, in the summer, around 450 million. Yes, they recruit a huge bit of that, a huge bit of that. But when you look at it on paper and the prosecution against Arne Slot, well, people will say this. Florian Wirtz, Alexander Isak, Hugo Ekitike, Milos Kerkez, Jeremy Frimpong, and others that obviously came through the door. There'll be a lot saying that any top coach in Europe would have loved to have got his hands on those players, and he could almost be getting more out of them.
Yeah, I think he should be getting more out of them, definitely. But what I would say is if you look at the last month, they're all just starting to slowly come good, especially Florian Wirtz.
Yeah.
Frimpong's obviously been injured for age. I think he's been really good the last few weeks. Kerkez has been pretty terrible all season, but I thought he was really good against Arsenal, especially in the second half. Ekitike has obviously been the top scorer this season. Yeah. So I think slowly but surely they are sort of coming together, and maybe in hindsight we should have expected them to take a while, because if you look at the new signings, if you look at Szoboszlai, for example, it took him a year. He had glimpses in that first season, but it took him a while to fully settle. It may be the same about McAllister. Gravenberch, he barely lifted a finger in his first year.
True.
So maybe we should have all seen it coming that they would have taken a while. But the thing is, all the original players suddenly nosedived as well. So it added more spotlight to these new guys. But I think now, after about 6 months, they're all starting to come good. But obviously, there's still quite a few levels for them to step up, especially Wirtz, who's obviously, when you cost 116 million, you have a lot of pressure on your back, not just from the Liverpool fans, but, wherever you go in the country, they'll all be chanting what a waste of money and whatever. And, probably would do the same if another club rocked up to Anfield with a 115 million player who was doing nothing. But yeah, I think they're all starting to come well. But yeah, obviously Slot, you would have wanted him to have maybe done a bit more with them so far.
I suppose because we mentioned players there. I mean, you referenced Dominic Szoboszlai. People will talk about this season and go, well, he's been 10, he's been 8, he's been right back. And Florian Wirtz, you mentioned there. I mean, we're thinking what we've seen him in the double pivot at times. We see him start in the number 10. We've seen him off the left more regularly, even on the right on occasions. Frimpong, we knew the nature of that recruitment. We've seen him at right back. We've seen him at right wing. But is there almost an element, and people will use that Florian Wirtz one, especially in those different positions. Does Arne Slot know how to get the best out of these new signings?
No, I don't think he does just yet. I think he knows what he wants them to do when they're fully fit and firing, and none of them have been yet. His argument would be that he's had such an injury crisis or problem with injuries that he's needed to just get them in the team wherever they fit in, square pegs in round holes or whatever it is. And it has been a bit like that at times with Liverpool this season, with Szoboszlai at right back, as you say, and the last game they didn't have a recognised striker. The last 2 games, was it actually? So yeah, I think Slot knows that at the end of the day, Wirtz will be a number 10. But I think he's just if you look back at the Prem, someone pointed this out to me. Overall, there's a lot of good number 10s who have sort of started out as wingers and have had to learn their trade out wide before coming in as a number 10. There's been a few for like United, City, Arsenal, Chelsea over the years, apparently. Foden maybe is one example. But yeah, they need to just settle basically. And I also don't think any of them look fully fit. So Slot will want to change that soon. But I think he knows where he wants them, but he's just not getting them in there at the moment.
Yeah, I suppose that's the consideration. The fitness one is a weird one, probably to talk about in a bit as well. And I know people are going to be saying this because there's always a little bit of uncertainty when it comes to recruitment. People will be saying almost it could be classed as a bit of a defence for Arne Slot. The finger should be being pointed at Richard Hughes because ultimately he makes the ultimate decisions. He is, Arne Slot's boss. He feeds into the churn and everything like that. Where do we see it on kind of who is responsible ultimately for recruitment? Because the club line seems to be, it's a joint enterprise. Everyone feeds into it. But it is Richard Hughes who makes the ultimate call as well.
Yeah, it's Hughes, it's Michael Edwards, and they've got a whole team of honchos behind them. You saw at the title celebrations last season, there was about 5 of them in that picture, Woodfine and Matt Newbury and these sorts of people who that all of these sporting directors are basically they're legendary when their team does well, and when their team doesn't do well, they're idiots who deserve the sack. That's just how it works at any club. You look at the clowns running Man United at the moment. But if all of a sudden United finish 4th and won a trophy, which you're not going to do this season, then they'd all be heroes. So that's just how it works. I think Hughes has done well to get the players in that he did in the summer because he needed to show that ambition. And, if we sat here this time last year and told you that they were going to get Wirtz and Isak in the same window, you'd all call me bonkers. So he's done well there. I would say actually that Hughes has done his job by bringing Slot the players that he wants. And now Slot has to do his job and make them work in the team. So I understand why there's a bit of heat on Richard Hughes, but if you'd asked any Liverpool fan on deadline day what they thought of Richard Hughes, they would all say he's an absolute hero for bringing in them players and the 2 fullbacks and all the other players he brought in. It's now up to Slot to make them work in the team because clearly he wanted these players. The only thing I would say on Hughes is maybe the squad looks a bit light with defenders and whatever, but he wasn't to know that Conor Bradley was to do his knee and be out for the season, or Giovanni Leone was to do his ACL and be out for the season, or Alexander Isak was to break his leg and be out for 3 or 4 months. So I think with all 3 of those big injuries, they've all been bad luck. It's not really to do with you couldn't look at their fitness record and predict that was going to happen, even though Isak's got a bad fitness record. It was just bad luck the way the tackle went in.
Yeah, it looks got to be a part of that. Any manager could use that. 3 bad injuries in the season. That is unprecedented largely. And I mean, sticking on the Hughes and the Arne Slot bit, because you've been in these presses, And Arne Slot talked the other day about, I've had to put midfielders in because of my lack of attacking options. And I remember when I watched that, I thought, I wonder what Rio Ngamoa and Federico Chiesa have got to say about that at the same time as well. So, I mean, it's quite clear that Arne Slot doesn't fancy Federico Chiesa. We've known that for a long time now. But we've always heard that famous phrase on Rio Ngamoa, a pathway. There's going to be a pathway available for him this season. And he's played so minimal minutes, it's fair to say. He might get a start tonight, obviously. We'll have to see on that. What have you made about, because I know you're one of the ones who's talked about that, it's been reported or said to you from the club, there's a pathway for Rio Ngamoa, but Arne Slot's just not used him. Is that understandable? Is that something we can point a finger at to Arne Slot?
Well, Rio Ngamoa came off the bench against Leeds, was it, on New Year's Day? And I thought he played really, really well. And he gave, and that was a really, really bad game. I would say even worse than the Arsenal 0-0 in terms of the drama and whatever. But and the Leeds players sort of looked quite comfortable. And I know they've been on an okay run, but this is a relegation fighting team, and they could have played the game, put the feet up in the second half because Liverpool didn't give him a go. Then Rio Ngamoa comes on, and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, they look a bit panicked now, the Leeds players. So I think that's what he brings, and I think he'd be great off the bench in these games. And I thought maybe would have been thrown on at Arsenal the other day, but he's in an awkward position where I think fitness-wise, Slot doesn't want to overwork him. I think he only trains 2 times a week because they don't want to. So that basically they look at Stefan Bajcetic, Jadon Danns, Cade Gordon. There's more that I've forgot that have all had really, really bad injuries after their breakthrough. And Liverpool think that's because they're just putting too much on them too quick. So they're trying to not do that with Trey and Rio. Obviously, there's a lot of clamour for Rio Ngamoa because from when he has played for the first team, he's barely put a foot wrong, and he's looked really good. Looked really exciting. But I think Slot, from inside the club, their view is this time last year he was playing in the under-18s and the under-21s. They want to just be very, very, very careful with him and not do too much too soon. However, I do think that he does deserve some more minutes and probably will see him tonight. The Chiesa thing's just ridiculous, so I think it's probably best if he just leaves at this point. I know Juventus, Napoli, a couple of other clubs have been linked with him in the Italian report, so we'll see if anything comes of that. But Slot just clearly doesn't rate him.
No.
And I know. He had that game in the first team, didn't he, where he didn't do too much, to be honest. So maybe he's right, but I think he could have given him more of a look in over the last 6 months, to be honest.
Yeah, it is a real mixed bag with those two. But it is interesting as well to hear that they don't want to overwork Ngamoa and thinking about the injuries to the youngsters at the same time. And for all the recruitment talk, which has set the chat panel off a bit, people talking about not wise to let Diaz go, people talking about the academy, and maybe Gucci up makes a sentiment I think a lot of people have expressed, went into the season a centre-back and a left-wing light, and of course the Mark Gay situation's well known. What I wanted to put to you is, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, there's players that Liverpool signed. We went away from the Premier League trend, as in the Premier League, as we know, has gone set piece, direct, physicality. Liverpool seem to want football players rather than athletes, regardless of their size, is maybe the right way of putting it. So almost we went away from the trend, and maybe we're missing that physicality. It's something we've talked about before.
Yeah.
Who does that fall on? Because I've seen all sorts with this. I saw some people saying, well, the analysts behind the scenes have missed the trend. Richard Hughes should be able to read the mood music. Arne Slot's wanting a particular type of player. Who are you leveling that at?
Well, I think that comes down to all of them, because from around February onwards, Arne Slot, and he's mentioned this to us in the press conferences, he noticed that teams were going more direct against his team. So he obviously knew that the trend was shifting, because obviously us guys, us commoners, only started to see this trend from about August, September onwards. But the managers would have seen it. Well, you would have hoped the analysts and the managers would have seen it from a few months earlier. So everyone knew that this trend was happening. And you've got teams like Brentford and your Leeds and these sort of teams who will just absolutely pummel you with the long balls, and fair play to them because it works. Now, Liverpool, apart from the two centre-halves, as we've mentioned on here before, is a very small team. If you were going to do the average height of Premier League teams, I think they would be close to the bottom, really.
Yeah.
Can't really think, you think of Arsenal, all the big lads they've got. And you think of who else is up there? Chelsea have got some big lads. City they've brought in Donnarumma. They've got Haaland, who's obviously scores his goals, but he's also back there on every corner, heading them all away. So Liverpool don't have that, and I think that's one of the main reasons why they've been so susceptible to the set pieces. What Arne Slot would say is, if you look at the best two or three teams of the last 15 years, Barcelona in 2011 era, Pep's Barca, Pep City, also both small teams.
Yeah.
And you can't say that in 2011 Barca were playing in the era that era was not tiki taka until they made it that they were playing against these big lads. So they sort of revolutionized it by playing a different way. That's what Slot would say, because he always references the Dutch style of play and Cruyff and Pep and all this. So that's what he would say. But I do think they do lack height, and that is probably a massive reason for their set piece woes this season.
Yeah, it does feel like a collective failing, but obviously Arne Slot goes into that collective as well. I mean, January, I'm not going to lie to you. I wish we were doing far more pods where you're telling me like they're making bids for this player, there's defenders coming through the door, they're looking at options, but he seems to be pretty quiet across the board, by the odd rumour or thing that drifts in now and again. I mean, the lack of January recruitment, because is there a camp of, well, he spent 450 million this summer, he should have enough, or is there a real camp that actually you've got to give him the help now at the same time?
Yeah, well, I think I understand that they've spent all the money, and I do understand, they're not going to rush into the signings. But one thing I never understand is when they say they won't bring forward transfers from the summer because of the money, because it's like, well, if you're going to sign player X in the summer, why isn't that money available now? And I do think that the plan in place that they had to maybe, if they had a plan in place to act tight in January and not budge and not panic, and that's fair enough. But that plan gets thrown out the window when Conor Bradley is out for the season and another centre half is out for the season, because of the back four that finished the game at Arsenal, which was Gomez, Konate, Van Dijk, Kirkes, there's only one senior defender that can play back up to that, and that's Robbo, who's out of contract in the summer. Gomez obviously can play at centre half and both fullback positions, but he's not fit ever.
No.
Obviously, he's a great lad, but when was the last time he went 3 months without an injury? That was a long time ago. So I think they just need to sign a defender, really. And obviously, we know all about the Mark Gay thing. Sounds like Gay, he would prefer a summer move because he gets a big pay. Also sounds like City are going to go all out and try and sign him in this month because of Gavardiol being out probably for the season and Diaz out for 2 months. I think Liverpool fans should be looking at that and thinking that is how Liverpool should be acting. Yeah. There's obviously alternative centre-backs on the market as well. And yeah, I do admire their thing of, we're not going to panic buy, but I think this is a very different situation where I don't think they would regret it, but I think they would regret not signing a centre half.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that at the same time. I think everyone would agree with that, but the mood music does seem to be not to expect a busy January. So there we go, people. Recruitment, big question mark over that. maybe the biggest thing that people will point to in the case almost against Arne Slot, the man management element. That's obviously been in question for a while. And I'm going to put a few things on the screen that it's important to discuss here, Lewis. I mean, I'm sure you remember this Jarell Quansah interview where he just didn't want to talk about his relationship with Arne Slot after, before the Bayer Leverkusen City game. There's that. We talked about Chiesa. People will reference what Queven Keller has said, Harvey Elliott at times, that ostracised, the lack of a pathway. And of course, when we talk about man management, the Mo Salah bombshell, when obviously there's been apologies since, but I had a good relationship with the manager. All of a sudden, we don't have any relationship. So Arne Slot's man management, as always, and his style, been a discussion point, shall we say. Are the question marks, do you think, over his man management, or are we know what Arne Slot is, we know what to expect?
I think there will be question marks, and after the Mo Salah thing at Leeds, the mix zone bombshell, whatever, the word that week was that there was a bit of a divide in the dressing room over whether they were Team Slot or Team Salah. And I don't think, it's as black and white as that, but I think there was a lot of talk about some players sort of maybe agreeing with Salah, maybe not as extreme as how he worded it, but, I think that it's probably there's been a few bizarre incidents with Slot's man management. You look at, or maybe it's not confined to Slot, but you look at Tyler Morton last season.
Yeah,
not allowed to go out on loan to Bayer Leverkusen, where he would have, been playing every week for at the time the German champions. Ends up having to stay at Liverpool. Doesn't play a single minute in the Premier League. Plays 2 or 3 games in the Carabao Cup. People like James McConnell playing ahead of him in the FA Cup, because it puts him in the shop window for a loan, that sort of thing. So there's been a few instances of that. You look at this season with Chiesa, and it's like Slot clearly doesn't rate him.
No,
he had interest in the summer. Why is he still here? And obviously, I think Slot, as we've mentioned earlier, maybe has his hands tied a bit with the Engamo and Yoni thing, because he doesn't want to overplay them. But again, it's like, how beneficial is it for them to be sat on the bench every week ahead of playing every week in the under-21s? Obviously, there is an argument that they will be learning more by being with the first team, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's been a few bizarre things this season, I think, and obviously the biggest one is obviously the Salah thing. Salah has said that he's got no relationship with the manager, and even though they may have shaken hands and all made up, there's no way that they actually, there's no way they have a relationship yet. And that is not, those comments are not the sort of thing that you patch up with a little handshake. So Salah's obviously, whatever happens, is going to be back this time next week, or maybe he'll have a few days off. So this time in 10 days, shall we say, because he's playing in the semi on Wednesday and then maybe the final on Sunday. But Salah should be back soonish. And it'll be interesting to see where the land lies with that one after what happened in December.
Yeah, it really will be what happens there. But I think man management is one that you just can't escape. I suppose this will feed into style of play a little bit, which I do want to talk about. You're in these press conferences all the time. I think it's fair to say Arne Slot is honest. That can sometimes come across as a bit blunt, a bit direct, and people will say maybe he should choose his words more carefully at times. But he is honest, I would say. That I disagree with anyone that tried to rally against that. Is that something that's been enjoyed by yourself and other journalists, that he will be honest about his feelings, how he sees it, and give full and frank analysis?
Yeah, I think he is honest most of the time. I think he's really good if you ask him a tactical question, because he will give you an answer. Sometimes I think he will give you an answer to Liverpool's detriment, because he did come out and say, if you want to cause us problems, this is how to play against us.
Yeah.
But also you think a Premier League manager should be able to work that out anyway. So he is honest in ways like that, and he can provide good sound bites. You sometimes think there's some incidents that you think if Klopp was in charge, he would have dealt with it completely different. And sometimes it's for a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. But you think that Martinelli thing the other night, if Klopp was in charge, he would have taught Martinelli a new one, whereas Slot basically came in the presser and said, "Oh, he's a nice chap." I was like, well, yeah, maybe he is a nice chap, but he has just thrown your player off the pitch. So that was a bit frustrating. But yeah, he can be honest. I don't know how the players would react to that. I think it's a typical Dutch way of operating.
Yeah.
You look at some of the other Dutch managers we've had in the Prem, Van Gaal, Ten Hag, Koeman, these sorts of people have all had a similar style, really. They're not gonna give the journalist the back page headlines, but they'll give them good info for their longer reads that they can thingy into it. So that's how it works for me, I think.
Yeah, it gives you quotes, it gives you plenty to get stuck into. And I know it's some of the questions, to be fair, that you've asked, and this has got to be a topic, maybe the topic that a lot of people are feeding into, the style of play right now and what we're seeing. Because, I mean, I go to the games, you're in the stadium. Anfield's supposed to be, as we know, a passionate, a reactive ground that, we get up for certain moments and certain things. But the words that people have used this season, and you'll know these as well: weak, passive, a bit boring at the same time. And I know this was asked in the presser the other day, and it's worth just reminding ourselves of how Arne Slot reacted to the word boring at the same time.
Talking about being enjoyed to watch, a lot of fans have said in recent weeks that football has been dull and boring. What do you make of that?
We use different words, and I would take certain things into account, but I want to win as much trophies as I can, but I think I'm also known for the fact that my teams always try to play attacking football, and I can only say that we are still trying to do.
Yeah, I remember that bit. We're still trying to do that. And I've already seen the comments in the chat panel talking side to side and bits like that. It is one of the charges we've got to sort of talk about this season. I've got to be honest and say, I think Liverpool have been boring to watch at times. There's no escaping it. A bit weak, passive, I can bring into elements as well. You can't just dismiss those words. There's evidence in front of our eyes, isn't there, this season?
Yeah, I think I've maybe defended Slot a little bit earlier in the podcast, but in terms of his style of play, I absolutely agree. It's been pretty turgid to watch in the last 3 months. And, New Year's Day against Leeds, the Wolves game just after Christmas. The Arsenal game was different because they're obviously a good team, but there's been a few games recently where I thought, oh, it felt like a chore to watch.
Yeah.
Especially the Leeds game and the Wolves game, I thought, because it is just like, well, I look at Liverpool and I think there's so many good players on the pitch that against the bad teams, they will probably find a way to win just by a moment of individual brilliance. But it doesn't feel like they're being coached to that win. No. It feels like Ekitike is just taking the chance when it falls to him, or Florian Wirtz is coming up with a killer pass, or Frimpong's putting in a good ball to the back post, or Van Dijk's getting his head on a corner. It doesn't feel like last season when there were all these pretty patterns and they were creating chances, and it felt like at times you'd have Salah, you'd have Diaz, you'd have whoever. They're almost queuing up to get on the score sheet. Whereas now it's almost like they score and it's like, oh, they've fluked a goal, have they? And I think they went to Craven Cottage, and I thought that Marco Silva probably out-coached Slot on that day, and I thought they were absolutely deserved of the point that they got. And I thought Daniel Farke, Leeds absolutely deserved their point at Anfield.
Yeah.
People say the atmosphere is flat, but it works both ways. It's like, what is there to sing about? What is there to get off your seat about? And there's not much, because you go to Anfield and now it's pretty boring all match. There's not much to write home about really, and you think if you're a neutral with all Premier League games on, I don't think Liverpool's the one to watch. Whereas last season it probably was. Whereas now you turn on a different team because they're more attractive to watch. Whoever that is, I don't know, but Liverpool are just going through that boring phase at the moment, and to be honest, I can't really see that changing too much anytime soon. But maybe they'll get a bit more structure, bit more coaching, and there'll be a more cohesive team in the next few months, and you know, try and finish third or fourth.
Yeah, just feel like a bit of hope rather than expectation, because I know you'd put this out, and sometimes I think of what Arne Slot says, and you just have it there in black and white. That quote from him: "I didn't change as a manager. I would love to play with 8 attackers if that's possible defensively, but if those 8 attackers don't defend enough, it's hard to win a football." So that was on January the 4th. And then I think about a couple of days later, he talks about, I need to have midfielders in my team because of where we are, which kind of contradicts that quote a little bit at the same time. And there's that phrase come in. We've almost, I think as you put it, the reference is a coin flip team. Don't get beat is the first priority, and then individual brilliance, isn't it? And you're just thinking about what you're hearing at the moment against what you're seeing. It doesn't really match up from Arne Slot, does it?
No, and there was two after the Fulham game in the presser at Craven Cottage. I asked him a question about his style of play, and Adam Patel from the BBC asked him a question about his style of play, and he seemed to be quite agitated and arsey with us in reply. And I thought and also the dull and boring question a few days later or before, I can't remember when it was. Again, I thought they were all fair questions because these are the things that, you know, I think, you know, like asking him if his team's dull and boring, it's a fair question. Probably maybe could have worded it slightly less bluntly, but I thought it was completely fair.
Yeah.
And to be fair to Slot, he said he agrees. He said it is dull and boring. It's just, I don't know what Slot's going to do to change it really, because you look at, there's little stills from matches and you're like, why are the players there? Why is there so many gaps? And it's like, what is the defensive structure? And I asked Slot whether he had to tighten up at the back, and has that led to a lack of creativity? And he basically disagreed with me, and I was like, well, it has, because after the Forest games in October, November, they were leaking goals, and to his credit, they're not leaking goals anymore. But now it's just so turgid to watch. So basically, between now and the end of the season, Slot needs to work out a way of keeping them tight at the back, but also adding a bit of flair back to the attack. And maybe that'll happen when Salah comes back, if Slot and him shake hands and he's back into the team. But who knows?
Yeah, it's funny because I could tell, and I'm referencing you because I knew you asked them. I know you mentioned Adam Patel there. Even after the game against Arsenal, where you've got a great result and you've outplayed, you know, the league leaders in the second half, just in case anyone missed it, he was still on about the sort of the boring elements. So I'll just play this bit as well.
I'm a bit surprised that people think this is a good performance, because when we have 60 or 70% ball possession against other teams, people find it boring. And now it's performance, but again, we hardly created a chance. And now we say, what a performance. This is who we are.
Yeah, just on that, because you alluded to it, there's a different expectation between going to Arsenal away and being at home against the likes of Leeds and Sunderland, and how you should be setting up. So it's right that seemed to hurt him. And I really want to steer into that bit you said as well about, I'm a bit unsure how he's going to change this, because you start to think, is it when Salah's back, as you mentioned, does he tweak the formation? But he seems to have got, I don't know if a modicum of success, but a settled side at the moment with the style that you can't just flip a switch and it goes back to attacking. I suppose the question is, if it stays like this, boring, turgid, but getting results to an extent all the way till the end of the season, does that impact him long term and staying in the job and getting an extension?
I think it does. I think around May and the summer, there was a lot of talk about a new contract for Slot. I've not heard much talk about that in the last few months, and I don't know whether that's just because people are just thinking we don't want that to come out while they're on bad form. I don't know, but it has died down a little bit. I think that I would be astounded if Slot doesn't get. I think he'll definitely get until the end of the season in the job. And I would be quite surprised if they don't give him next season as well, just because of the expenditure and just because of knowing how this Liverpool board or Liverpool hierarchy works. But then when you come to think of the extension, if this time next year they're still playing bad football and they're still struggling for the, out of the title picture, I think then, I can't see them renewing the contract. But I think Liverpool have a lot of faith that he will turn it around. And I think they have a lot of faith that once the new signings come good and get fully fit up to Premier League fitness standards and form, and once maybe they have a bit of better luck with injuries, I think that Liverpool fully imagine they'll be back fighting for the title next season.
Yeah.
And obviously this season there's still a lot to play for, still in the FA Cup. Well, they've not played a game in the FA Cup until later, so they've not had a chance to not be in the FA Cup. But they're still in that for now, and they're still obviously in the Champions League. So there's still trophies to play for.
Yeah.
Playing like this. Well, actually, you say that, playing against how they did against Arsenal in the second half, you sort of think they could beat because if that was a Champions League game at a PSG or a Real Madrid or even Arsenal in a semi-final, for example, that's an absolutely brilliant Champions League performance. If it was, if that was a Champions League and you're thinking get a 0-0 away at the Emirates, taken back to Anfield, that would be brilliant. So they've shown that they can play more pragmatic, which is obviously a good thing. Now it's just about coupling that up with looking lively on at the other end as well.
Yeah, it's whether the two can be mirrored up. And you're right. You think of some of the performances, it's felt like a bit of a Champions League season, like a win at the San Siro, beating Real Madrid at home, the Arsenal away. Funnily enough, it seems like the bigger the team, the easier it is for Arne Slot. But we won't mention PSG because, Christ, that's come up far too often this season as well. You kind of alluded to this because I know there is a bit of a school of thought of there are some Liverpool fans, it's fair to say, that now I've had enough of this boring style. I want an interim in, someone just to even steady the ship, something new if we can't get our top targets, even though they think some of those could be available. I mean, if it's an interim, the name Steven Gerrard, of course, is going to be mentioned. And that famous interview a few weeks ago, if Liverpool need me in any department at any time, I will be there for him. But I think you've kind of alluded to this a little bit. All the noise from the powers that be above is Arne Slot is safe for now. You think at least this season, maybe even next at the same time as well. The credit in the bank. The chances of an interim to set people's expectations, barring a disastrous run, are pretty minute now, aren't they?
Yeah, it's not going to happen unless they suddenly lose 10 in a row and Slot gets sacked or resigns. I don't really see the point of interim managers either, to be honest. You look at United right now and they're basically just writing off their season by hiring, Carrick, who's obviously a good manager, but he got sacked at Middlesbrough in the Championship, or Solskjaer. They're basically just written off the season, and many people may argue that sticking by manager is doing the same, but I unless it gets really, really bad, that's not going to happen. I'm fairly sure. So you can rule that one out.
Does feel that way, barring something that we wouldn't really want to even countenance, but we'll see what happens there. And I suppose the final thing, future decision, because I know you're leaning towards that he'll get this season and probably next at the start for you, is the big question mark around, honestly, who might be available in the summer. Because if he doesn't change the style of play, and we do, seem a bit boring, turgid, what we're seeing at the moment all the way through, also in the summer that Nagelsmann, for instance, you can throw out names. Xavi Alonso, you feel could be available. Luis Enrique, the manager market, the head coach market, whatever you want to call it, it looks a lot more attractive in the summer. That could work against Arne Slot as well.
Yeah, it could. You look at all those names you've just mentioned, though, were considered in 2020, whatever year it was, 24, when they hired Slot, and they went for Arne Slot. So I don't know how that changes things really. I can't see Nagelsmann gets linked with all the jobs, but if Germany get to the final of the World Cup, for example, he's not going to be available till late July probably. So that's not a mover for me. You look at Xabi Alonso slowly turning things around at Real Madrid, maybe buying himself a little bit of time. I don't know. Obviously, they had the Super Cup last night, so maybe that poo-poos that. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then the manager that a lot of people in the industry seem to be banging on about is the chap at Porto, Farioli.
Yeah.
But then you think he's just another Arne Slot in terms of he's doing it in a league that's not one of the big 5 leagues. What's to say he's not going to do, have a good season and then fall apart like Slot has done? So I actually think there's a real dearth of top quality managers at the moment. Iraola at Bournemouth, what was it, like 10 games without a win or something recently? Ollie Glasner, I think that he would be another Thomas Frank, and what I mean by that is he's good at that sort of mid-table club, but then when he makes that step up, he's terrible. Like Frank has been at Spurs after doing such a good job at Brentford. I think there's a lot of those sorts of managers out there, but none that are really going to revolutionise the next big clubs. Looks like Maresca may be the next City manager if Pep leaves. So there's not really many out there at all, if any, that I think would be suitable for Liverpool. But then obviously if Slot carries on like this or it nosedives again, then obviously the conversations may have to be held.
I suppose that, and it's probably a good place to finish, the final one maybe for the summer about top quality links to Liverpool. If Xabi Alonso is available in the summer, is that maybe a biggest threat long term to Arne Slot?
Possibly, yes. Possibly. But as I said a minute ago, they obviously considered Alonso when he was at Leverkusen, but thought Slot suited the style better. And if Alonso was available, it would mean that he had failed at Real Madrid, which what does that say about his qualities or whatever? Obviously, a lot of good managers have failed at Real Madrid, but so it's food for thought, but we'll have to see. And knowing what we know about the Liverpool hierarchy, I don't think they're going to be getting twitchy about Slot just yet, especially when he's 10 matches unbeaten.
Yeah, it might not be what you want to hear, ladies and gents, but as we said throughout this show, all the suggestions from higher up is that Arne Slot is safe, as Lewis suggested, maybe even from this season, likely to get into next season as well, unless we maybe get something we don't want in terms of the run of results. January recruitment, that seems pretty quiet, and we're pretty universal that no one really understands why you wouldn't bring players forward when you have hardly any senior fit defenders. Can get the words out there we go. All it leaves me to say, though, is for answering all the questions around recruitment, tactics, style of play, using the words like boring, turgid, but redemption. Honestly, Lewis, it is massively appreciated.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And ladies and gents, that was another AI special for Anfield Index.